Welcome everyone to UFO Unlimited. I'm your host, Scott Russell, and today's a very special episode because we have our first guest. And this is the way the shows are going to go from now on. Is I'm going to be having top ufologists and authors, experiencers, abductees, basically anyone in the UFO field on the show to talk with me, so I'm not just babbling to myself and to you out in internet land oblivion. So today I've got Preston Dennett on the show. He's an author, a ufologist. He began investigating the paranormal back in 1986 when he discovered that some of his friends and family had been having sightings and weird encounters. He eventually became a field investigator for MUFON. He's written over 28 books and over 100 articles on UFOs. He's been in MUFON Journal, Nexus, Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine. He's been on the History Channel and Sci-Fi, and he is just an all-around UFO stallion. So let's welcome our guest, Preston Dennett, to the show.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you so much for coming on. So everyone, this is actually our second interview because the weirdest thing happened after our first interview, which I'm sure Preston will remember, is immediately following, I emailed him and I told him that right after our interview, when Skype was downloading, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my computer screen turn blue. And before I could even read what it had, some white writing on it, which I know from what little I know of computers, that's like the death sign, is you get the blue screen of death. And that's what happened. My screen turned blue. And before I could even see it, it just shut off, and my laptop is not powered on since. So maybe we touched on something, or like we were talking about in the other interview, and we'll get to it. Electrical things sometimes just seem to fail around me, and I'm not really sure why. But the show's not about me. It's about Preston and his book, Wondrous. And Preston, can you just start off telling everyone what kind of got you into the UFO subject and what started you on this wild journey?
Yeah, a journey I had never thought in a million years I would take, honestly, because I didn't believe in UFOs. I just didn't. Stars are too far away. There's just, the subject isn't taught in schools. No one was taking it at all seriously. It was ridiculed pretty much everywhere on the media, so I just never took it at all seriously. Even when, as a teenager, my brother came running into the house saying, "I saw a UFO." I'm like, "Mark, shut up. I don't believe you. Go away." No, you didn't. You may think you did, but it couldn't be an alien spacecraft.
Right.
But that all changed, and it was really very shocking to me, and completely changed my life. It was November 17, 1986. And I was just sitting there in the living room with several family members watching TV, the news, and a news report came on about a UFO sighting over Alaska. And they described how this pilot of a Japanese commercial airliner thought he saw a UFO. That's kind of how they put it, like, "Oh, he thinks he saw one."
Right.
And they just joked about it, and it was very tongue-in-cheek, not serious at all. But I do remember they showed the pilot. I thought, well, this is a pilot. How could a pilot think he saw a UFO? He's supposed to know what he's doing, and he clearly doesn't, and he must have seen a reflection off the ice cap. Thinking, Alaska, there's an ice cap. I'm just making all these false assumptions. Later found out it was an amazing, amazing case with multiple witnesses, 2 objects that appeared in front of his jet, which were twice the size of his jet. bigger, I mean, huge. Yeah, and it appeared on their onboard radar. It appeared on ground radar, the FAA, who later denied it and said, no, we made a mistake. These were just split images, which was a complete lie. We now know. Yeah, declassified documents prove that they knew exactly what this was. So that was my first real moment.
Okay.
Because I had been exposed to the subject a little bit here and there on maybe Saturday Night Live or something, or
Right.
In Search of. There was, I don't know if you remember that show.
I do. We're probably somewhere around the same age, so we probably, growing up, I was born in, the early 70s, so, there were the occasional UFO shows or, the occasional people on the news laughing at the person that saw the sighting, making jokes. But I always thought it was a possibility, but I never really thought too much about it. But
yeah, I didn't think too much about it, but I was pretty sure it was impossible. That, as far as my thinking went, even when they showed a family on In Search Of, who all saw a UFO, I thought, no, they didn't.
Right.
Because I don't know why I didn't believe it. I just didn't. And,
it's almost like we're pre-programmed to not believe, like unless you're a very open-minded person. And I know a lot of researchers have never saw a UFO, and yet they dedicate their lives to it. I've seen 8 solid, undeniable UFOs, and probably more like 12 to 15. But
hey, Scott, that's a red flag. Just
I know it is.
Probably a contactee at some level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a number of sightings myself, because there are a lot of researchers in this field. And when I found out they were real, I wasn't satisfied with just talking to people or reading about it. I wanted to see them. And that was the first thing I did, was talk to my brother Mark. I'm like, all right, tell me what you saw, what you think you saw.
All right.
One thing I hated is people do is like, I know, like, you believe you saw a UFO. They're just, it's very hard for people to accept.
Nothing angers me more. Well, few things anger me more than what's his name? He's one of the top scientists, total UFO denier.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes, thank you. That guy drives me crazy. It's like, dude, you have no idea. Either I mean, he's got to. I guess he's got to play along with our current level of understanding of technology, but man, if he saw what I saw, he wouldn't be sitting there denying. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, there's someone who needs to get abducted. I kind of think he probably knows. I don't know. It's just hard for me to...
He's got to. If he's as smart as, his degrees say he is, then he should know. Anyone with half a brain that looks into it, there's something there, right? So anytime someone's denying it, I always think it's got to be for a reason. So
skeptics haven't examined the evidence by and large, because I think if you take an objective look at what is out there, you cannot but come away convinced.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me, because I talked to my brother Mark, and he's like, "Oh, I saw this UFO," and described an incredible sighting. And it was so close, there was just no chance of misperception.
Right.
He saw a metallic craft with a dome and colored lights 50 feet away. And he had 2 people with him who I ended up talking to. I knew them, they were his friends. And that was the first sighting I ever sort of looked into. And thought, okay. It was clear to me that this was, right off the bat, aliens, UFOs, and real, but I just couldn't accept it. I'm like, no. And I started asking everyone in my family. And I'm like, my sister-in-law saw UFOs and she had friends with her. I had a good friend who saw, they rushed outside because they heard this weird noise, a low buzzing noise. She's a pilot, a flight instructor. That's kind of struck me. I'm like, all right, another pilot, huh?
Right.
And she described this egg-shaped object, which went right low over her house.
Huh.
And I'm like, wow, this cannot be happening. And that's when I went to we didn't have the internet. This
Right.
was, 1986. So I started going to the bookstores and used bookstores and libraries. I'm like, wow, the Roswell UFO crash. Kidding. These things crash. And then the Travis,
Right.
remember I got the Travis Walton incident, the Betty and Barney Hill book. I'm like, this is real. People are being taken on board. There's a cover up. And it just blew my mind. I heard a quote from J.L. and Hynek, 1 in 40 people have been taken on board. That knocked me over. And I thought, no way. Because that would mean I know someone who's been taken on board. I'm sure I know 40 people.
Right.
I mean, shoot, there's 20 people at my office where I worked. And that's what I did. I started asking them. And how distressing. Because the lady whose desk was right next to mine said, yeah, me and my whole family, we saw a UFO and it was darting around. And she described this little star-like object. Stop, dart, turn at right angles. Just my whole family saw it. And her daughter walks in and I'm like, hey, because I kind of knew her daughter just a little bit.
Right.
And turned out she had been abducted, taken on board by Greys. Full conscious encounter.
Wow.
Yeah, so it hit home for me. I joined MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and I bought all their back issues, which, stretch back, the MUFON Journal stretched back 20 years at least.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is being taken seriously. There are people, this Earth is being invaded by aliens. They're taking people on board. There's Greys, there's different types of ETs. This is insane. Why isn't anyone talking about this? It took me a year of almost panic to sort of come to terms with this is a real phenomenon. Why isn't this being taken seriously?
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely just one of those, it's the biggest story of mankind, of our history, and people don't really seem to care much about it. So I don't know. Once they see one, though, they tend to change their minds. So let's talk about your book, Wondrous. It's a great book. It's a great read. I loved it mostly because there's not a lot of puff or fluff, I guess. There's not a lot of details that you don't need. There's enough backstory of the people, and you kind of tell it as you go along. So it's not like you get bored with a bunch of facts about people's lives and all these. You get pretty much right into the encounters and their thoughts on it, and it's just fantastic. And I was wondering if we could start off with the very last chapter in the book, which is the dental implant, chapter 24, or 20, is it 24? It's got to be 24 or 25 because there's 25 accounts.
Yeah.
But you know the one I'm talking about, the dental implant. That was absolutely mind-blowing and crazy. And you actually have pictures included in the book. So can you go ahead and start us off on that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite cases in the book, and just mind-blowing. And there are a lot of UFO books published, and they do have a lot of fluff and speculation in them. So I really do like to dive right into the case right away.
Oh yeah, and
And
I realize most. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I realize most of the field is speculation because that's pretty much all we have, you know. But yeah, so go ahead
yeah,
and dive right in.
that's why I like to stick to the facts, because there are people who are having these encounters.
Yeah.
And it was some years earlier, I think it was like, let me see, 2016, when I was first contacted by this lady from Indiana, a single parent with a teenage son. And she was having a difficult time because she had taken her 14-year-old son to the dentist. And it was just a normal visit, you know, cleaning, checkup, x-rays. And at the time, she didn't realize that anything unusual had happened. Little did she know the dentist was not telling her the truth. She found out 3 years later in 2017, or I'm sorry, well, yeah, that's right, 2017, when she went back to the dentist. You know, she, of course, goes to the dentist every year for cleaning and checkup, but this time they had x-rays again, which they do every 3 years or so. And got an incredible shock. She's sitting there in the waiting room, and her son's in the dental chair, and she can see him because there's a little window that you can kind of look into the operating center there.
Right.
And the dentist is looking at the x-rays, and he's calling over another dentist, and then another. There's 7 dentists in this office, and he called them all over to look at the dental x-rays.
Right. Wow.
And so she's motioning to her son, like, what's wrong? What's wrong? He's shrugging. He's like, I don't know, Mom, I don't know. And finally, they call her in, and they show them both the x-rays. And you can see these x-rays in the book. They're right, let's see, below his lower left molar. Yeah, right there. You can see there's a BB-shaped object. Oh, well, it's larger than a BB, really. It's sort of right there alongside his tooth or under his molar, back right molar.
Yep.
And the dentist is like, did you shoot yourself in the mouth with the BB gun? And the kid, who I call Anthony, that's not his real name, I said, no. And his mom's like, no, that never happened. And the dentist kind of knew it because there was no entry wound. The tooth was asymptomatic, meaning, you know, it was healthy. There was no pain, and there's no foreign body reaction because, you know, if you get shrapnel or something in your body, it's going to surround with, you know, pus and an infection and so forth.
Yeah. And
there was none of that. So they're like, what is this? And she says, well, I don't know, maybe it's an alien implant. Just joking. UFOs were the farthest thing from her mind. She'd never thought about them really at all. And they're like, well, we don't know what this is. And she says, oh my gosh, you know, can I have a copy of these x-rays? And they said, sure. And she took them home. She's looking at them, and she started doing an investigation. And she's like, well, we had x-rays 3 years earlier. Let me call the other dentist who took the x-rays and see if it was there. And got a shock because, yes, the x-rays taken back 3 years earlier, in 2014, showed the same object. So this was not a defect on the x-ray machine. It's not a water spot, as some people have tried to tell me. I had a nurse tell me that. I'm like, listen, did you look at the x-rays? You know, because, you know, they had been using that x-ray machine all day, and it did not appear on anyone else's x-ray.
Right.
And so this was very curious. And she started doing her research, going online, trying to find answers. And there was absolutely no explanation for this. It could not be natural. She sent me the x-rays, actually. And with her permission, I sent them to doctors, to an emergency physician and a medical doctor, you know, just a general practitioner. And they both said the same thing the dentist said, like, well, did he shoot himself in the mouth with the BB? And of course I said, no, look, there's no entry wound. It's bigger than a BB. The tooth is fine.
Did they have any idea of what it might be? Like, the material? Like they keep saying BB. Is that just because the size, or possibly because it was metal?
Yeah, it's metal due to the way it appears on the X-ray. The dentist thought it was metal, so did the emergency physician, and so did the general practitioner.
Right. Wow.
And by its perfectly spherical shape, it's obviously not natural. You know, it's not like a tooth or something.
Right.
So she kept searching on the internet, and the only thing that kept coming up was the alien implant, which was very upsetting to her. And she asked her son, "Have you ever seen a UFO?" And he said no. He was lying to her. He was keeping it secret because she was so upset. And so she calls me and, you know, sends me these X-rays. She's like, you know, what could this possibly be? You know, she kind of need because I'm a UFO researcher. And so, of course, my first step is like, tell me, have you ever seen a UFO? And she says, no. I'm like, your son either? She's like, no. Like, have you had any dreams about this? Because I was sure she must have seen a UFO, or him. And I was shocked to hear them say no. Because I've been contacted by other people who have this, and they almost always have a UFO history. I mean, pretty much always.
Yeah.
And she denied it. I'm like, okay. Anything unusual? And she's like, well, my son is very psychic. He sees ghosts. He's got very clairvoyant. You know, has a lot of synchronicity. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a sign. What about dreams? Have either of you had any dreams about UFOs? She says, well, I haven't, but he does. He's very into the human, you know, the Nordic type aliens. I'm like, ooh, okay. And she said, well, I did have one dream when he was a little boy. I saw him, or what I thought was him, when he was like a toddler, submerged in liquid. And he had big black eyes. And he was in this breathable type liquid. I'm like, oof, this sounds okay. This is not direct evidence, but little red flags are starting to add up. I'm like, you sure? You sure you've never seen a UFO? He hasn't? Are you sure? And he was in the room. He didn't want to talk to me. He's, you know, very shy. And so she pulls the phone away from her ear and says, honey, have you seen a UFO? He wants to know. And he's like, well, yeah, Mom, I did. I didn't want to, you know, to scare you. She's like, honey, what? And he described how in 20, right before the X-ray when he was 14, so I guess it was 2014, he was walking outside of his best friend at night outside of their home in rural Indiana and saw these colored lights, yellow and blue. And they dropped down and started flashing all these other colored lights at them, freaked him out. He's sure it was a UFO because it was close and it was flashing and it was weird and it was hovering, and they ran inside. So that's clearly when this all happened. He can't say that there was missing time or anything. I suspect there may have been, because I mean, there's this thing in his mouth.
Right.
So that's how it all started to roll out. And this was an interesting case to me because often people will contact me and they're like, well, this happened when I was a kid and this happened to me 10 years ago. So, but this was a live case rolling out before my very eyes.
Yeah.
So we kept talking and I'm searching through their history and she's like, well, no, nothing really unusual. She's like, well, I did have this weird lump. The mother said this sort of bump appeared in my nasal cavity one day. And it always irritated me and I don't know what it is, but I'm like, oh, okay, this is another sign. But not enough for me to say that this is absolutely UFO related. I kind of knew it was because what else could it possibly be?
Right.
And seriously, what else could this be? And that was her problem. She was absolutely out of her mind with this and she could not let it go. And she calls me up one day, I think this was 2018 or so. She says, they came. I'm like, what? What happened? Just the Grays came last night. I'm like, oh, can I, tell me what happened? Can I record this? And she's like, of course. And she described how her son had come into her room because he was having trouble sleeping. And this was the first I've heard of this. You know, contactees often have insomnia and some anxiety about this. And she's like, yeah, we usually sleep with the hall light on or a night light. I'm like, oh, yes, of course. Why didn't I ask that? I forgot. Because that is another thing. And so she says she woke up in the middle of the night and two grays were hovering over her son. And that's when she realized she couldn't move. She was paralyzed. She could feel them kind of digging around in her brain, communicating telepathically with her. She says it was a very strange feeling. She could hear them talking in her head telepathically. And she, actually, how it started is she opened her eyes and there was all these colored lights kind of twinkling in the room. She closed her eyes and opened them. They were still there, and then boom, these ETs are coming in. And they're hovering over her son, and she looks to the door because they had left the bedroom door open and the hallway light on, and there was a gray. And you know, this is 2018. Everyone knows what grays look like at this point.
Right.
So she recognized them, and she said it was up to just over the doorknob, which is what, 3-4 feet, and typical gray, you know, large bald head, dark wraparound eyes, pale skin, and it was looking at her, and it said, "You don't have to worry. Everything's going to be fine. There's no need to fear. You're okay. He's okay. Everything's fine." And over again said this. You don't need to worry. Your son is going to be fine. And she said he must have said it 50 times. And at some point she fell back asleep, wakes up the next morning, and gets out of bed and gets ready to make breakfast. And suddenly she remembers. She freezes, and it all comes pouring back into her head. And her son's looking at her like, "Mom, what's wrong?" She says, "You know what? Nothing. I'm actually really good." And she's looking at him very intently. And he's like, "Mom, what's wrong?" She says, "They came, honey." He's like, "Who? Who came?" "They, the Grays. They came last night." He said, "Oh, they came for you?" And she said, "No, honey, they came for you." He's like, "Oh." And she describes what happened. He's like, "Oh, I wonder if my implant is still there." And she's like, "I don't know. We'll find out," because they were due to go to the dentist in like 3 weeks. And that's what they did. She felt so much relief. She felt, you know what? This weight just lifted off my shoulders. I felt fine. I felt no fear from these guys. I felt that they were not here to hurt us in any way. So it was a very benevolent encounter for her. And they go to the dentist, and the dentist takes an x-ray, and sure enough, it's there. And she has 2 x-rays scheduled. So he takes another x-ray, and it's not there. Implant is gone. And so that freaks everybody out, and the dentist agrees to take another x-ray free of charge because the insurance didn't cover a third x-ray, right?
Right.
So he takes the third x-ray, and it is back. The implant is back.
Wow.
Now, this may sound crazy and unusual, but if you study these implants, if you look into the work of Dr. Roger Lear, you will see that these implants do move around. They can appear and disappear. And that's exactly what happened here. One of the dental technicians was so upset, she had to leave the room. She was just emotionally distraught over this. Because this is proof. This is suddenly, you can't deny that something is going on here.
Yeah, and it's pretty much impossible for an X-ray machine to see something on one X-ray, and then not see it on the second, but then see it again on the third. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. people talk about, hey, there's no proof, this is all just stories. I'm like, you're out of your mind. Yes, there's a lot of cases which are just basically on a person's word, but pretty much every person I've interviewed has some form of physical evidence.
Yeah.
Truly, they have a scar. They might have landing traces in their backyard, multiple witnesses, evidence of an implant. It's not uncommon. Pretty much everyone I've interviewed at some point goes to like their physician. I remember one guy, he broke his leg playing football in high school. And the doctor was taking x-rays. He's like, oh, you broke your leg. You broke your foot before, huh? And the kid, is from Everett, Washington, said, no. He said, well, you have something here in your foot that's metallic. You sure? And he's like, no, I never did. And another lady goes to the doctor to get a cyst removed. And they're like, well, your cyst is gone. She's like, what are you talking about? She had been visited that night. The ETs removed her cyst. A lot of cases have physical evidence.
Yeah, there's another case in the book where someone got healed.
Yeah.
What was it? Was it his back?
I've got cases of back. No, in this case, it was Dudley Delaney, who was like, I think he was initially a chiropractor and then did sort of alternative healing. And he's quite an elderly gentleman in his, I believe, early 70s. He was late 70s. At any rate, he was suffering from prostate problems.
Ah, that's what it was. Okay,
Yeah.
you'd think I'd remember. I just read the book a couple of days ago.
And yeah, he really had no UFO history that he was aware of. He did, but it's often hard for people to connect the dots to all of this. It's not unusual for someone to say, no, I don't believe in UFOs. I have no history of this. Not realizing that, well, I did have that sighting. Yeah, there was that, when I was a kid, there were figures entering into my room. Yeah, I did have that one episode of missing time. But they kind of compartmentalize, deny, explain away, refuse to think about until there's a in-your-face type incident.
Right.
Which is, I think, sometimes done on purpose because people are so good at denial. It's one thing humans are really good at. It's like, no, it's not happening. This is not happening. So yeah. I think what will happen is people will have a very scary encounter on purpose because the ETs are like, this person has to wake up. People need to know we're here and real.
True.
So yeah, healing is absolutely something I hear quite often.
I could use some healing if they're listening. I like the case you just went over because so many cases I hear, it just kind of starts off. I woke up and there were the grays, or there were the insectoids, or the lizard people, or whatever. But I like this one because they can't just suddenly appear. Like, I guess they can, but a lot of them, they just appear or they walk through a wall. But she said she saw lights kind of flashing off, and I'm wondering if that was maybe some kind of the way they teleport into the room, or something like that. How they can just show up. It must be some kind of technology that they're using, I think, right?
Yeah, that's often what people will describe as colored lights filling the room. The whole room might glow with intense blue light or red light or colored kind of sparkly lights flashing.
Oh.
And the grays will walk through the wall, drop down through the ceiling, or just sort of appear. Perhaps a person will see an orb, and the orb will expand, lengthwise and widthwise into an actual entity. So they have different ways of sort of coming into your house.
That's crazy because I've been for probably 10 or 15 years was the first time I actually consciously noticed that occasionally I see a red orb fly around my house. It's like the size of a penny or a nickel, and it looks kind of like a laser light, like you'd use for your cat, you know? And it just kind of like, but I noticed that it doesn't only light up on the walls. It actually lights up when it's not, shining against something. So that's telling me it's actually an object of a light of some sort that's, on its own, like free. And every time I see it, it's only for like a couple seconds. But the reason I'm bringing it up is after our last conversation, I had asked for a sign from, I don't know, if I'm being taken. I wanted a sign because in our last interview, we went over a lot of stuff about my sightings, and you were leaning towards I'm probably an abductee. And so I saw this thing flying around my room when I was trying to go to sleep. And I saw it for about 2 or 3 seconds. I just remember thinking, does it think I'm a cat? Like, does it want me to chase it? Like, what is this? Like, what's going on? And I just kind of laid there with my eyes open for a few more minutes. It was gone. It only lasted like 2 seconds. And I just fell asleep. So that's just one of the many weird things that happened to me. But yeah, I wish I've been asking for some kind of signal, just give me anything. And so far, that's the only thing I've gotten back. So still waiting.
Yeah. It's very strange when you have something like that happen, because your first thought is, am I actually seeing that?
Yeah.
Is that a reflection? You don't want to jump to it and say, oh, that's obviously unexplained. You really, like, it does something to your brain. Very strange.
Yeah, and that's why I say that I've only, I say I've seen 8 UFOs, because those were all longer than like 3, 4, or 5 seconds, something that my mind could have played tricks on me or something like that, even though I'm, like 90% sure of what I saw. I don't include those in my actual UFO sightings because they were so fast,
Yeah. There's actually like 10 things I ask a person. Well, there's more, but 10 main things I would ask a person to determine if they're having contact. And the primary one being, have you seen a UFO? And how close was it?
Yeah.
It's a close-up sighting. And by that I mean 100, 200, 300 feet, 1,000 feet is a huge red flag. Number 2 would be, have you seen more than one UFO? Because if it's, repeated sightings, absolutely, that is an enormous sign.
Yeah.
Check
and check so far. Keep going.
Another would be orbs of light in your house.
Okay, check.
Another would be a strong emotional reaction to the subject. Are you at all interested in it? Are you repulsed by it? Another would be dreams about UFOs or aliens. Another would be any unusual scars on your body, marks, unexplained bruises, scoop marks, unexplained healings, anything medically unusual.
Right.
Another would be unexplained events in early childhood, such as
one of those. Got a few of those, actually.
Another would be missing time, of course.
I don't recall any missing time.
Another would be any family members, parents, particularly, or children, or aunts and uncles, or great grandparents, or what have you.
Right.
Because chances are, if you are a contactee, someone else in your family is also having this happen to them. There are all sorts of questions I ask people to determine, like ringing in the ears, perhaps, is another one.
Oh, I get that a lot.
Like beeping tones, psychic events of any kind. Have you had precognition, past life recall, out-of-body experiences, dreams that come true.
Right.
This is a huge commonality among contactees.
Yeah, some of that is definitely are things that I've experienced and gone through. I have no recollection of ever being taken. I don't have dreams about aliens. I almost never remember my dreams. I think that's probably because I'm kind of a insomniac. Like you had mentioned, that's another sign there. But I sleep for about 3 to 4 hours at a time, and that's about all I can do. So I usually I'll sleep 3-4 hours at night, like 12 to 4, and then probably around 11 or 12 or 1 the next afternoon, I'll lay down for a little bit of a nap just so I can still function. But yeah, total insomniac, so that kind of frightens me.
Yeah, just don't need to be frightened. They're not here to hurt us.
Yeah, I should take that back. I'm not frightened. I'm actually excited. I want to meet them, but
I mean, it can be absolutely terrifying for people.
Yeah.
I get that. It can be very traumatic, especially
Yeah, if you don't know what's going on, if you never even heard about alien abduction, and all of a sudden you got these, 3 grays standing in your room, I think my heart would probably shoot out of my chest.
Yeah, I get that. For little kids who have these things coming into the room, it can be very, very scary. They will tell the parents, and the parents are like, "Oh, you're just having a nightmare." Right. And the kids know this is not a nightmare. They're awake. This is why I absolutely hate it when people are like, "This is sleep paralysis." I'm like, listen, sleep paralysis does not leave scars on your body. Sleep paralysis does not involve UFO sightings. Sleep paralysis does not involve multiple witnesses. Leave landing traces. You can't photograph sleep paralysis. I mean, come on, think this through.
I've had sleep paralysis several times, and there were no aliens. So, I did see that red orb, the thing I was telling you about one time. I think I had it like 4 times in my life, sleep paralysis. And really you do feel like someone's kind of watching you, but the strangest thing that happened to me when I was having sleep paralysis was I was hearing a conversation between 2 women talking about recipes and cooking. And I was just laying in my apartment at the time on the couch, sleeping. And I was having sleep paralysis. I was awake. I couldn't move. I could open my eyes and look around, but I was hearing this conversation about things I know nothing about, like cooking, recipes, like specific measurements, like all this weird stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how is this happening, But then, 30 seconds or so of that, I woke up and I kind of snapped out of it. But that was, the strangest thing that happened to me with sleep paralysis. And I've never seen aliens, so I don't think that's really, you can't just fully connect the 2 of those like that.
I've had sleep paralysis too many times, because that sort of comes along when you start doing out-of-body stuff, which I got really into.
Okay.
And absolutely have had that, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not even in my room. There's people moving around furniture, people talking across me. Never has it ever been ETs. But I will say that I think there is a little bit of a bleed through here, that some people who think they're having sleep paralysis probably being abducted. And some people who are think they're being abducted could be sleep paralysis in a few cases, because it can be very similar. But, it is definitely not explainable by sleep paralysis.
Yeah, and all the skeptics need is just one case that falls apart, and that's the one they talk about, right? Like one fake case or whatever. Let's get back to your book, Wondrous. Tell me about the very first chapter in the book. It's the woman jogger who sees a tall alien gray. And I got to say, the artwork in this book is fantastic.
Yeah, I love this case.
Yeah, you just started it right off with the grand slam with that one. Go ahead and tell everyone about that case, if you would, for us, please.
Yeah, love this lady, Eleanor, I call her. She didn't want her real name used, but she's a teacher, gave a very lucid interview. This occurred in 2006 in O'Fallon, Illinois, in a pretty rural neighborhood. And she likes to go jogging early each morning. I mean, like 4:30 a.m. So I'm like, all right. I can't get up that early, but
no. And I'm up, but I'm not going jogging, but I'm up.
But she enjoys this. She's got a bunch of kids. She's goes jogging early in the morning, and takes her dog along with her. Goes jogging down her street, turns onto another street, and is heading up this street towards a cross street, which is called Kyle Road. And I've actually looked this up on Google Maps and got the exact location where this occurred. And she said she's approaching this T intersection of Kyle Road and sees, actually her dog saw it first. Her dog stops and looks up. And she's thinking, oh, it's going to be a deer. It's going to be a raccoon, a fox, which wasn't unusual. And it wasn't. It was a man on stilts with extenders on his arms walking down the middle of the road. This was her first thought. She's looking at this, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. And besides, this thing looks like it's got to be 15 feet tall. And it's making big strides, moving quickly, 6-foot strides. And she's like, what is this thing? And it walks right under the streetlight. And that's when she got a good look at it. And it was not a man on stilts. This is a busy road during the day. At 4:30 a.m., no one's there. And it was she thought, is that a grasshopper? No, that's a praying mantis. That looks like a praying mantis. Because it had its arms kind of hooked up like a praying mantis does, like a begging dog. Yeah. And the arms were pumping up and down. And it had a long stick-like body. And it was sort of mottled gray and very long limbs, huge head, gigantic eyes, triangular shaped head kind of, very much like a praying mantis. And its head is kind of tilted downward and it's scanning the road, looking back and forth as if it had dropped its cell phone or its the keys to its UFO or something.
Right.
And she's looking at this, thinking, oh my, and her dog is watching it walk by, so she knows she's not hallucinating. And it just
I am shocked by that. I just got to stop you really fast. I'm shocked that the dog did not freak out.
Right?
Shocked by that.
She's lucky that she had another. So people I've talked to who are alone have a much harder time. And yeah, it was a dog, but still, that's confirmation, good confirmation.
Yeah.
And so she watches it go by, and she's a gutsy gal, because I was surprised what she did next. I'm like, what happened next? And she says, well, I wanted to see where it was going, so I ran after it. Like, you're kidding. She's like, no, it didn't seem to see me. I really wonder about that. Perhaps she's right. I was thinking this is a one-off at this point, so because that's the way she was describing it. But almost always when someone has a face-to-face encounter, they're a contactee. But that's not the way she was talking. So she runs after this thing, it turns off into the cornfield and disappears. And that was it. I said, well, what's it doing there? Do you have any idea why it would be there? Because usually there's like, is there a mine? You know, is there a something that would attract a 15-foot tall praying mantis? And she's sure it's 15 feet tall because it came right up to the street light there.
Wow.
And she went there the next, you know, when it got light, and measured it. She's like, no, it was a cornfield. There was a high school there. There's, you know, people's homes. The only thing I can think of, and she says, I think this might be significant, but I don't know, is I live, you know, 10 miles away, or, you know, 6 miles as the crow flies, from Scott Air Force Base.
Ah.
And when she said Scott, I'm like, ooh, Scott Air Force Base, ding, 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 ding. Because I knew of a very famous case which took place in that exact area. And I instantly thought, well, let me see, that was the year 2000. A UFO skirted all across Illinois, went just north of Scott Air Force Base, which is exactly there. And it was a huge sighting, multiple witness. And yeah, it was some years earlier, but Air Force bases are a huge UFO magnet. And this one was already implicated. So that was...
I live in Illinois, and I missed that sighting. I was really mad at myself.
Yeah, it's a great sighting. Some police officers all across the county, in Dupo, and gosh, I forget the names of the cities, but numerous cities saw this. And I did more questioning with her, and I'm like, 2006, why is that ringing a bell? And I'm like, oof, the O'Hare, Chicago O'Hare Airport encounter had just occurred. It was just weeks earlier. And I ended up looking it up. It was like 300 miles away, or 100. It was not close, but it was kind of interesting. And she found out later that there was another sighting by another gentleman some 40 miles away. And he described driving down the road late at night when a praying mantis type creature crossed the road in front of him. And he couldn't tell how tall it was because it was on all fours.
Oh, that's
yeah. And so I started, I questioned her about the whole sighting. And I'm like, okay, can I ask you a few more questions? Have you had any other unusual experiences? She's like, well, yeah, there was this one UFO sighting. I'm like, oh, really? She described a sighting over her neighbor's house. Her daughter saw it. I'm like, let me ask you this. Anything weird when you were a little kid? Age 5, 7? She's like, well, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. What happened? She says, well, these things used to come into my bedroom. I'm like, what do you mean things? She says, they were short little figures. And it was very scary. And it would always be around my bed and come rushing into my room, and I'd jump up and I'd scream for my parents. And her parents said, you're just having nightmares. And it happened so often that her parents said, stop it. Stop waking us up. This is just nightmares. So like most kids, they are left to their own resources to deal with this. And finally she wakes up and she's not in her room. She's in somewhere else, a small room. There's figures over her. She feels like they're going to operate on her. She says, I felt like they were going to fix me. And it was really scary for her. So yeah, there's another red flag. So now she's like ticking all the boxes. And I asked her, okay, anything else? She says, well, I did have a couple of really unusual experiences. And real quick, she's a high school student sitting in the front seat of a car, not the driver's seat, but the front passenger seat. And there's a child behind her who they're driving along the road. This is just during the day. This is in California, actually. And she hears the child behind her gasp loudly when a car pulls up next to them, and the child gasps. So she looks out the window to see what this child is freaking out about. And she gasps because the person in the driver's seat of this car next to them is not human. And I'm like, what do you mean not human? She says, well, I know how crazy this sounds, but this person their head was a giant egg shape, and they had big, dark, black eyes with no whites in them, and they were completely bald except for little spriggles of hair, and it turns and it looks at her, and I'm like, did you think it was an alien? And she says, no, I didn't think of aliens. Wasn't thinking of aliens at that time. I thought it might be some sort of a demonic creature or something, which is not unusual because a lot of people have sort of religious thinking. This is, people kind of go to their belief system to interpret this, and people have looked through the world through the eyes of their belief system, and that's their go-to because they've got no other explanation.
Yeah.
And she ended up seeing this same figure, or one very much like it again, in, get this, the Sam's Club department store.
Wow.
Yeah, she looked at it, looked away because she couldn't believe her eyes, and it was freaking her out, and looked back and it was gone. She says, there's no way it could have disappeared that fast.
Wow. I wonder if those are hybrids or actual aliens that are able to disguise themselves and only certain people can see them.
Yeah, I wonder too. And this is where we get into the realm of speculation, which I hate to do, but you can't help it.
Yeah.
And I think that probably, I mean, just based on the actual eyewitness testimonies, yes, they do have the ability to disguise themselves and appear as human. And just based on all the eyewitness testimony, I suspect, this is kind of my assessment, that they show themselves on purpose to individuals, contactees often, and like, yeah, we're here, look, this is us, and then boom, they're gone.
Yeah.
But are walking among us, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if they could be in a little orb, the size of like, a lunchbox or something, and the orb can grow, and then a being can come out of that, they can do that. They can surely look like a human, I mean, seems pretty simple to me.
Yep, and that's absolutely what we see. I mean, there's another case in the book where there were these two vendors who make their own handmade jewelry, which they sell up on Beach Street in San Francisco. And they had a couple of unusual UFO sightings, but the weird incident that happened was so crazy. I've never heard a case quite like this, but each case has unique elements.
Yeah.
And this one was absolutely what I would call an outlier. But the guy gave a great interview. He's very serious. He's like, please don't use my name. And he described how he was selling his jewelry one afternoon, bright sunny day. It's crowded, there's lots of people, and he steps away from his booth just to take a break, and he's watching it from a distance, a couple 100 feet away, when he sees a couple, a man and a woman, approach his booth. And he's like, wow, they look a little unusual. They're dressed in trench coats. That's weird. And the guy's got a hat on. He's taller than the woman, which is not unusual. And dark hair. She's got short hair. And he's watching them, and he thinks to himself, oh, I hope they try on my rings. Maybe I'll be able to sell some jewelry. I hope she tries on my rings. And this woman turns around and says to him telepathically in his head, this is why I can't try on your rings. And she pulls her hands out of her trench coat pockets and holds them very close to her chest so no one else can see. And her hands are very unusual looking. They're not human hands. And I'm like, what do you mean they're not human hands? He says, I don't know how to describe this, but they looked like ravens' claws, like crow's feet. They were very thin, black, claw-like, with not fingernails, not fingers. These were very, very skinny, claw-like hands. And she says, this is why I can't try on your rings. And the man she was with got upset with her. He's like, what are you doing? You can't show yourselves like this. We have to go. Tell him not to follow us. If he follows us, there's going to be trouble.
Wow.
And he's hearing all this telepathically, which is unusual, to say the least. And so she tells him telepathically, don't follow us, or there's going to be trouble. And he tells her telepathically, don't worry, I won't. I can't, because I can't leave my booth. People might steal my rings. And so they exit this little shopping area. This is an outdoor vendors, right? And to get away, they have to walk right by him, 10, 20 feet away. So they're coming up towards him, walking by, and she turns and she looks right at him. And he said that her eyes were all black, wow. not normal eyes at all. And if you've ever interviewed someone who's seen ETs, almost always what they will tell you is their eyes were so strange. Their eyes were hypnotizing. Their eyes looked right through me. Their eyes were not normal. So that is something I look for when people see, these figures, whether they're human looking or praying mantis or grays or strange humanoids of any kind. So yeah, that's a case of ETs among us in a public place. And it happens more often than people think.
That's crazy. And I don't mean to get like a little bit out of the norm here, but there is a show called Resident Alien. It's a comedy, and it's actually pretty fantastically funny if you ask me. But in the show, the alien is actually he disguises himself as a human, just somehow using his body, like something they've learned to do. And he basically looks like an insect. He's got 4 arms, and 2 that come out from his chest that are really small. And, he took over the form of, he had to kill this human and took his form, learned how to talk and walk and all that stuff. It's just a really lighthearted, fun kind of show. But yeah, I do believe that it is possible. And
yeah, I've seen that show. It is funny.
You have? Okay, great. But I wonder if the eyes, it seems like that's the one thing they won't give up is their black eyes. You know what I mean? Like that's the dead giveaway. I wonder if our eyes are just maybe just genetically insuperior or something. Like maybe they can see, so many more colors and in the dark and all this. And maybe they need their eyes in some way to telepathically communicate, or I don't know, but it seems like all the stories, like the children with the black eyes, all that kind of stuff, there's always the black eyes. It's kind of like that's the one thing they won't let up on. I don't know, any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. From what I understand is, well, with the grays, people describe the dark eyes almost exclusively, but
right.
They're taken on board. Some will describe how they will remove what appear to be contact lenses.
Okay.
And that their eyes are actually blue or green. This is not unusual. And I've heard this quite a bit. So this could be an eye covering because, our light here is too bright for them. I don't know. It's very unusual, but the eyes do seem to be a dead giveaway. Yeah. Whether it's ETs on board a craft or ETs walking among us in some way. And I suspect that they can absolutely disguise themselves as a perfectly normal person. Because I looked into this. I ended up writing a whole chapter in one of my Not From Here books, which is a series that I've done about the more unusual aspects. And I kept hearing accounts of ETs in places where they shouldn't be. And I'm like, this can't be happening. In casinos, are you kidding me? In bookstores, bus stops, gas stations, restaurants, cafes, subways, train stations. I'm like, oh, all right, let's look into this. And yeah, it's almost always the eyes that give it away, but they can absolutely disguise themselves completely. There was a case of a lady, Lisa Ahrens, in Florida, and she had stopped at a gas station, and she's walking back to her car, and there's this beautiful, muscular, blonde young man, and he's kind of smiling at her with twinkling eyes and being very flirty, and she's, you know, not the type of person to sleep on a first date, but he seduced her. She couldn't believe that she picked this guy up and took him home and, you know, got intimate. And he was gorgeous. He was a beautiful, young, muscular man with curly blonde hair and sparkling blue eyes. Handsome, right? And she wakes up in the middle of the night and sees him as he's going towards the restroom. And he looks normal, right? But as she looks in the mirror and sees his reflection, he's not normal. He is a gray alien.
Wow.
And her eyes go wide, and he closes the door into the bathroom, and she jumps up and opens the door because she's freaking out, right? And this bathroom, this is an apartment, had no exit. There's no window. It's just, you know, like your average closet type bathroom.
Right,
and he's not
right.
he's not in there. He's gone.
Wow, he's just gone.
Right.
Wow.
So this is speaking towards the gray agenda of reproduction and sort of taking people's genetics or creating hybrid babies. There are a number of cases like this. People will have their genetic material taken, or sometimes they will be intimate and experience a pregnancy that goes missing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a case in your book about that missing pregnancy, which was actually very, very, I had never heard of one where the pregnancy had actually lasted that long.
Yeah.
So do you remember our last conversation where I was trying to tell you about the flying saucer I saw that was like rustic colored, and it had the, not lights, but rows of what looked like circles, and it disappeared from the top down? Well, I have my drawing of it that I made. It's not good. But this is what I saw.
Oh, wow.
And it was going back and forth like that in the sky. And when it disappeared, it was from the top down. And then when it flew over me, it was a circle. So I know it was a circular shaped craft. But that could be like the in-between phase of a silver disc going from silver to cloaked. And I think that's what that is.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen anything that looks like that. And why would it look like that? I think those circles are what makes the invisibility possible. So
yeah, I will say that there's a dazzling array of variation of UFO shapes,
yeah,
and colors and appearances, and it's very complex and really perplexing. And after talking to hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of witnesses and contactees, this is why I love interviewing people who are having full-on extensive contact, because you start to get answers to all these millions of questions. And I think the answer to this dazzling array of shapes is that these ships have such an advanced technology that they can morph their ships. The skin of these craft is very much like a squid or a chameleon or a cuttlefish. and can change colors, can take on the appearance of the sky or whatever appearance they want.
Yeah.
Not only the outside, but the inside for that matter. Because going back to that case with the alien implant, that lady was taken on board again, and she saw this figure you see here behind me.
Yeah.
Walk in to this room, which was, the room itself was dressed up as a living room. It had a couch, an easy chair, a flat screen TV, cheap carpet, a window. But she could see it was a UFO. It was, there were no lights. It was purely lit up like UFO rooms are, and rounded walls and a strange door. And of course, when 9-foot tall praying mantis walks in, all bets are off. I mean, this is
Yeah.
So they have this ability to change the appearance of the UFOs inside and out. And I think this is an important fact to consider, because there's a school of thought among UFO researchers and experiencers that some of what people are seeing is not extraterrestrial, and that this is an interdimensional intelligence that takes on different masks and is not extraterrestrial at all, but presents itself in this weirdly symbolic way that is based on your belief system.
Yeah.
And I am not a subscriber to this theory. I'm not going to say, of course, it's all aliens, because I don't think it is. I think probably some of it isn't. And perhaps some of it is an interdimensional intelligence, or a jinn, or a trickster spirit, or something along these lines. But I don't think that the evidence speaks towards that. I think the evidence, if you look at it objectively in its totality, by far, almost hands down, the conclusion is obviously extraterrestrial. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying this in any naive way. I'm looking at this in a very scientific way, because how else would you explain alien implants? How else would you explain the fact that people who are being taken on board are not in their bedroom? The police are called. People are searching for their children and they're not in the house. Yeah. How else would you explain the circular imprint in the grass behind your house, where water does no longer soaks in? How would you explain the photographs and the moving films of craft? Why is it that people are seeing metallic craft with windows and aliens coming out? What about the crash retrieval reports? We have metal fragment cases. We have an enormous amount of evidence speaking towards this being exactly what it appears to be. Aliens, extraterrestrials. And if it's not, where does that leave us? Are we some sort of symbolic manifestation? No, obviously we're not. We know we're physical beings. We're living it. And it makes perfect, logical, almost inescapable sense that there would be other biological beings living on planets. And my main problem with this other theory is that it's very vague. It's hard to explain the mechanism behind it. And it's extremely anthropocentric. It's basically saying the phenomena revolves around us. And all of human history and the pursuit of knowledge has shown that we are not the center of the universe. So
no, we're not.
I just have to put that out there, because there are people who are very intelligent who have really dug into this phenomena and know all the cases. Well, as much as you can.
Yeah.
And subscribe to this theory that this is not aliens. And I always corner them. I'm like, okay, do you think some might be? And pretty much everyone will say, yeah, probably. I mean, people, even scientists who are skeptical, admit almost 100% of the time that aliens have to exist.
Yeah, you can't have interdimensional beings without at least having aliens from your own dimension. I mean, the odds would be astronomical that there's no life in any of our galaxies, in our universe, but there's another universe and they found a way to come here. that could be possible, but I'm with you. I think that aliens come from our universe, and that's what it is. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and interdimensional isn't an explanation. I'm sorry, because science knows there's other dimensions, and we've proven this through quantum physics. And the fact is, if you do research into the human organism and life on Earth and the paranormal, everything is interdimensional. We have an interdimensional aspect. We have a soul, a dream body, an astral body, call it what you will, but there is life after death. The evidence for life after death is overwhelming.
Yes.
So yeah, trees are interdimensional. You go to the other side, there are trees there.
Yeah.
So it's not an explanation to say, oh, this is an interdimensional phenomenon. Like, what do you mean by that? Everything's interdimensional.
And that's harder for me to believe than aliens. That, like I would first go to aliens before I'd go to interdimensional. The point that most of the scientists and everyone thinks is, well, they're just so far away. There's no way they could get here.
Yeah, that's based on the false assumption of technology.
Yes.
Like, you really think they're using propellants?
Yeah.
I don't know. I keep harping on this because Jacques Vallée, people are quoting him like, we still don't know what UFOs are. I'm like, really, Jacques? I have to give him the respect of being, a great researcher and in this field for longer than I am, which is 35 years now. So he's been doing this, I don't know, 50 years or something.
Yeah.
A very long time. And I understand there are weird aspects to this phenomena. And he'll point to like a person who sees carpet on board a UFO. See, this is interdimensional. I'm like, no, this is technology.
Yeah.
They can do this.
Trying to make you feel more comfortable. It's not like they're bringing you to their house in another dimension. You're on a craft and they're saying, hey, look, this is what your house kind of looks like. So we'll make you feel more comfortable. Maybe that would be more believable to me.
Yeah, I agree. There are still questions surrounding this phenomena. The origins. And because often people will ask, where are you from? And they're like, it's not important. Or we're from a place you don't know about yet. Or they're very evasive when it comes to their origins. Remember the Betty Hill case? They showed her a star map. And she's like, oh, where are you from? And they said, well, do you know where you are on this map? And she says, well, no, I don't. And they said, well, then you wouldn't understand where we're from. It wouldn't make any sense to you. They were, again, evasive. And even though Marjorie Fish kind of figured it out, the star map and all that, Zeta Reticula. And Zeta Reticula does come up in other cases. And Orion comes up in cases. And so we do have some idea of some possible star systems. But I'm thinking it's a lot more common out there than we realize because there's so many types of ETs.
Yeah.
It's not just grays and praying mantis. Not just human looking. There is a wide variety of short little blue beings, skinny little light beings, cat-like beings, dog-like beings, strange humanoids ranging in height from anywhere to, well, there was a rash of cases in Malaysia involving tiny little ETs, a foot tall, well verified, seen by groups of people. Tiny little miniature UFOs. Crazy.
I think I may have seen a few of those. I've seen lights, just like dark sideways at night and just do like strange things. So I always thought, what if it was a tiny little UFO,
remember that Twilight Zone?
Yeah.
with the tiny little aliens, and they turned out to be from Earth.
It
was a cool episode. Yeah. The Twilight Zone, who knew it was real?
Yeah. Based off actual events. What isn't that what they say in the beginning, or I forget, but So everyone, Wondrous, Preston Dennett. It's a great book, 25 great stories in here. We did go over a few of them, but you got to read the book. Very affordable. I actually got mine on Amazon Prime. It was here the next day. It's awesome. I love it. Preston, thank you so much for coming on. We got to do this again soon.
Hey, I'd love to. I've got a new book coming out shortly, so.
You do? All right.
Yeah.
Well, hit me up. When's that due out?
Well, hard to say exactly,
Hard
but
to say.
due this month, the way it's looking.
Oh, fantastic.
But hopefully, fingers crossed.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave all your information and your web links in the description box for everyone on YouTube. And thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. This is, actually our second interview. And I know like 4 weeks ago when we did it, the world wasn't quite as crazy as it is now with the Ukraine situation, but hopefully there will be peace. And I look forward to meeting with you again, Preston, when your new book comes out. And what's that going to be called again?
I haven't released the title, but I would tell you.
Okay.
We'll be the very first to hear it. It's called Symmetry, a true UFO adventure.
Nice. Thank you. A first here on UFO Unlimited, the first of many firsts to come, I'm hoping. Everyone, please hit that subscribe button, and we will be doing a show once a week. And as long as I have guests that are willing to do it, I have a few lined up right now. So, Preston, thank you once again, sir. Have a great day. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Look forward to it.